everybody, and welcome to another edition of Interactive Wrestling Radio right here on WrestlingEpicenter.com. It's James Walsh, and our special guest this week is one and only Jerry Jarrett, making him actually the third Jarrett. I was thinking about this before we called you. The third of the Jarrett family to be on our show. We've had Jeff and Karen on the show before, so we're honored to have you on, sir.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And I mean, the history speaks for itself, and I could go on, and I'm sure that in the course of the next 20 minutes or so we'll cover a lot of ground, but I want to start off by talking about your new book called The Best of Times that's out there now, and tell us a little bit about this book. How does it differ from the other book that you wrote back in 2004 about the early days of TNA? How does this book differ from that perspective?
Well, the first one was really not technically it's a book, but it was just my journal, my daily journal that I keep. It was reprinted with, at the time I was in the construction business and development business and the wrestling business. And all I did is delete any comments or thoughts or reports concerning the construction business. The rest of it was just the events as it happened, and you know how you keep a journal. Exactly. Just what are your feelings? When I finished and went back and reread it, I was very tempted because some of my thoughts were very personal, and I thought about editing it, and then I said, no, you know what, that would make it fiction.
Right.
And just published it as is. This book, and it was only about the year 2002.
Right.
Which was when we developed our launch, TNA.
That's right.
This book is an autobiography, and it starts in 1942 when I was born, and it goes through this year. And, you know, it covers my life. I tried to be as honest as I could in the book, but, you know, anytime you're writing, it's impossible for your mind to not view things the way you want them best viewed. And so unlike the journal, it, you know, it's like all other autobiographies, and I tried the best I could to give a true account of the events and how I felt about them.
Excellent. And that is something, you know, we've been doing this show for 9 years, and as you might have expected, your name comes up quite often because you were such an integral part in the early stages of so many careers, from everybody from Sting to Hulk Hogan. And, you know, it has to be amazing to really take a step back from your perspective and look back and see all the accomplishments that you have done in your, I don't want to ouch your age here, but 69 years of life so far.
Yes. I'll be 69 September the 4th. And I've really, really been blessed. I named my book The Best of Times because I really feel like that I was blessed to live and grow up in the 50s and enjoy the professional wrestling business during the 70s and 80s. And I really, as I look back on my life after I wrote my autobiography, I said to my wife, you know, I'm really blessed. I lived in the best of times.
And that's one of the things that people have been talking about when you read the reviews of your book, is just the positive attitude that you had throughout it, despite all the turmoils that you faced. I mean, we talked a little bit about the early days of TNA, and in recent interviews I know that you've talked about how hard, you know, some of that was and the betrayals involving that. But it has to have been it's an amazing ride, and it has to be very difficult to be positive in this business, which seems to eat so many guys up alive.
Well, you know, when you look at everything objectively, rather than subjectively, in sports, every record that I know of has been broken in recent times, and I'm sure they'll all be broken again. So, it's almost ludicrous to sit and say, "Oh, the wrestlers were a lot tougher back in my day," or we were better back in my day. The truth of the matter is we were different back in my day. I enjoy, for me personally, the traditional wrestling and the storylines and the telling the story, but I spend as much time as I can with my grandchildren. And this past weekend, we went to Memphis to the WWE matches. And Jarrett is 10 years old, and Jackson, his little brother, is 6, I think. And try to tell them that Memphis wrestling was better than the event we just saw. And so you have to be aware that the world changes and continues and goes forward. So, do I like TNA program today? No. I didn't like WWE when they were in the Attitude Era. I happen to think that children are subjected enough to profanity and sexual innuendo in real life. We don't have to indoctrinate them with dropping the F-bomb when they're watching wrestling.
And that's the thing that I think people get confused with, and that is that the Memphis territory was not done like a cartoon show, which people seem to think wrestling has to be if it's going to be kid accessible. It was very much in your face, very much, you had your promos, you had all that going on, and the studio and the brawls and everything that you could want, but it just wasn't sexual innuendo. It just wasn't laced in all that kind of other Howard Stern stuff. Instead, it was wrestling with an edge, and I think that is what people are still looking for. I think that's why if you're a tape collector, you're still, trading your left arm to get a hold of all the Memphis TV from back in the 80s and late 70s.
Yes. But I just watched, and I hate to be, I'm certainly not putting the wrestling that I produce down. I think it is some of the best wrestling that's ever been. But I also do not think that it's fair when people totally discount the wrestling of today. Mm-hmm. The WWE match between Undertaker and Triple H at WrestleMania, I would put that match up against any match that's ever been produced in the ring. It was just incredible. The bumps, the storytelling, the intensity, is one of the best matches that I've ever seen. And that was this year.
There you go.
So, it's real easy for old timers like myself to be lost in the 50s.
Right.
It's almost natural. I pride myself in not going there.
Very good. And that's why you're still a relevant name in the wrestling world, where a lot of the old timers have, gone by the wayside to some degree.
Well, I just, I had terrible heart problems, and my doctor said that it was because of stress. So I try not to allow myself to get stressed by saying, oh, this is terrible, what's happening here, or this is terrible, the young people and the way they act and
Yeah.
It's just that it's different from what we had in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. But, if anybody has grandchildren, I think that it is impossible if they will be honest with themselves and not look at the world through their eyes and see that everything's pretty good. Everything's pretty good. The wrestling, it may be different, but they enjoy it. They love it. They love John Cena. This Kofi is one of the best athletes I've ever seen. Anyway.
What I keep saying to people is when I grew up, I have fond memories of all the guys I grew up watching, and to somebody else, they might have been too cartoony. They might have been too over the top, too this, that, the other thing. They might have been, the common perspective is because it was part of Vince McMahon's vision for the business was that they were, the ones who helped, as they claim, destroy it. And, for me, as I was a kid growing up, I don't view it that way at all. And I think that's what you're saying is that the kids who are growing up watching it today are not going to view these guys as part of some kind of a downtrodden era in wrestling. They're going to view them as, the kids of the guys of their childhood, their heroes, their favorites. And
yes.
There you go.
You're exactly right. And here is the thing, too, to separate. I spent my life producing wrestling in the hopes that people could suspend their disbelief so that they could, it would be like at a movie where you forget that there's camera and lights and sound and 15 people standing around a scene. You can get lost in the characters. That's what I prided our Memphis wrestling on, was that it had a real texture to it. Now, I'm sitting there and it was entertaining, but I didn't get into the matches at all because the kids were on the front row. My wife and I and my daughter, we were on the second row behind them. And I could hear them calling the high spots. And so that fact alone, watching John Cena, not even trying to cover up, openly calling the match, it was so different from what I prided our wrestling on. But I looked over there at Jackson and Jarrett screaming, and it didn't bother them at all.
Well, somebody who had to have performed at the Memphis show that you were at is somebody that your name is probably in the annals of history going to be joined at the hip with, and that is Jerry the King Lawler. I'm sure in the book it's discussed. I have the book. I got to be completely honest with you in the interest in full disclosure. I haven't had the chance to read the full thing yet, but I'm sure that he is a big portion of the book. How did you end up hooking up with Jerry Lawler the first time, and how is your relationship to this day?
I called Jerry and told him we wanted to come down, and he was gracious and met us before the match. He and I were both at the showing before, and we went over to his house and visited. This time we were rushed and didn't get a chance to visit him on a personal basis, but we're we're friends. And I just think that Jerry is still amazing. I said in the book, I'll say it now, he's the most talented talent that I ever worked with. And he proved it this past weekend in Memphis. I mean, he gave as good a drop kick as Kofi Kingston gave.
That's amazing.
And yeah, and took backdrops and slams, and he had a old-fashioned Memphis match, and you didn't see him talking. And you know, he's still the king of Memphis, and the crowd gave him the reception and the warmth that they did when we were at the Mid-South Coliseum. So, you know, he took the children backstage and had their picture made with John Cena and himself, and you know, they got to high five Kofi and the Miz, and you know, they had a ball. They'll never forget it.
Here's an interesting one for you that comes from one of our fans. And that is, how close were you really to being in the market for buying WCW at the tail end?
Well, I thought we were really close. John Corcoran had a group of investors that offered them $70 million, and they turned it down.
To sell it for $2.5 million.
What?
They ended up selling it for $2.5 million.
Yes.
That's just stunning.
Yeah, well, I don't, you know, I don't even want to go there and speculate what it was.
It's very interesting though, but so you guys really were in the market for doing so then?
Oh yeah, and you know, they sent John Corcoran all the financials, and John and I had hours on the telephone, crunching numbers, and I have no doubt that we couldn't have made it profitable from the moment we bought it.
Now, there was a rumor going around that it was yourself and your son Jeff and the Harris boys on the boat, and that's kind of where the concept of NWA TNA came, is that when you guys found out that there was a potential that TNT and TBS were not going to be an option for TV, for WCW, of doing the weekly pay-per-views. Is there any truth to that?
Yes, it was, no, we were, who was there? Bob Ryder.
Bob Ryder.
Bob Ryder had a fishing boat.
He's the one actually who shared, I believe, the story the first time on the show about 8 years ago.
Yeah. Jeff and I went fishing with him. And that night, we were having drinks on the boat. And, you know, he's telling me what a shame it is that I'm not in the wrestling business. And why didn't I get back in? And I said, well, I don't have $50 million, and that's what it would take. And so anyway, Bob said, well, I've been thinking a lot about it. The revenue stream that is the most profitable is pay-per-view. Why don't you just have a pay-per-view company? And I said, well, you know, I don't think it'll work, but Jeff did, and he desperately wanted, you know, to stay in the wrestling business. I tried to get him to come in the construction business with me and Jason. But he wanted to stay in the wrestling business. So when we got back home, he went to crunching numbers. And, you know, he'd come over to the house and say, what do you think of this? And what do you think of that? First thing you know, I said, well, you know, okay, I'll try it.
There you go. And you're still in the wrestling business, no matter how hard they try, they keep pulling you back in. And you're doing your own wrestling talk show called Inside Pro Wrestling, and I know you're kind of in potentially a transition period, but what's going on with that show, and how are you enjoying doing a little bit
Well, a major 100,000 watt station just made us an offer that I don't think we can refuse, and but there is a third player in the market, and so we're having that meeting tomorrow, and so then I'll naturally call 104, the place we are now, and tell them, because they were really nice to us and in fact started us, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're on Saturday.
That'd be good. And that's where you are now, right? Saturdays?
Yes.
Very good.
And what I'm saying is our original contract expired this past Saturday.
Oh, okay.
And there's a good chance that we will not have missed a week, just at a potentially different station.
Very good. How is it for you to, be part of the more analytical side of things and talk about the wrestling business as opposed to being, it's inside pro wrestling, being inside of it as much as you were to now be more analytical of it? Is it hard for you to change, your perspective and offer it in that role?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, I really enjoy it. I lived a full and exciting life in the professional wrestling business. But I couldn't, or I wouldn't even attempt if that was offered to me right now. Vince McMahon has, when I came back home, has made me some incredibly generous offers. And so if I wanted to be back in the wrestling business, I'm sure I could be. But I can't travel 100,000 miles a year. I don't want to. This morning, and this is going to sound real corny to you, but this morning, my wife of 40 years, I think now, and I had coffee on our patio over, and our pool is in the backyard, and beyond the pool is a nice lake. And we sat there and had coffee, and I wouldn't trade that for a Madison Square Garden sellout. Now, I know that sounds corny to you, but that's where I am in life. I can do the radio show, and it's not any stress, and it's fun. We had Jim Cornette on, and he's a blast.
Were you able to keep him FCC compliant?
Yeah. No, he was, now that he's with Sinclair, he has to wear his corporate hat, and he was a real gentleman. But anyway, he's funny regardless. We've had some great shows with some great talent. Dutch Mantell was good, Lawler was good, Bill Dundee was good, Road Dogg Jesse James. I mean, and I'm forgetting some great ones, but, it's really fun to talk to the boys and not be their boss.
That has to be an amazing experience for you. And, I can't be happier for you because, like I said, I'm a huge tape trader, tape collector, and the Memphis stuff is, one of the rare gems of my collection. And I can't tell you how much to this day that my wife goes in the tub at night and I pop in an old wrestling tape, and how it still does it for me. It still reminds me why I love it. And I've said a million times on this show, and I'll say it to you, the main reason why I kept doing shows like this, even in the times of wrestling that I'm not the biggest fan of what's going on these days, is going back and watching this stuff and seeing what it could be and, once again, could still be. And I can't thank you enough for being a big part of bringing that style of wrestling that I grew up on and I really admired to me. And I really can't appreciate enough and thank you enough for joining us tonight on the air tonight.
Well, you are very kind, and I appreciate you giving a plug for my book. It was a labor of love, and every single one that I sign or autograph or somebody buys is special to me. It's meaningful that somebody would even want to share, my life. So I appreciate this opportunity, and
I do have to ask you one last question, and it kind of goes along with what you said about TNA. You're obviously not a fan of the fact that since the WWE is trying to be the PG company, they're obviously trying to be contrary and be the more suggestive product, more in tune with the Attitude Era. Your son still works there, and how do you feel about Jeff and how he's doing in the company? It kind of seems like he's more falling into the shuffle rather than being the big star that he was in the early days of the company.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, the stress and the pressure of being in business with your son, our family, was, it was detrimental to our relationship.
Oh boy.
And Jeff and I, and it's pretty common knowledge, we don't really have a relationship now.
Oh.
I wish that TNA was not trying to experience the Attitude Era, but they are, and it's very difficult for me to on the one hand be truthful and say we can't watch the product, and then it sounds like that I'm anti or knocking Jeff. And that's not the case at all. I don't know that Jeff owns any of TNA anymore. I don't know that he does or he doesn't. But I don't think that he has very much input into the creative for sure. And that's just from, I still have friends that are there, and they talk to people and they talk to friends, and just from what I hear, I think Vince Russo is still the dominant force.
There you go. Well, last question, and it's kind of a silly one, but it goes hand in hand with your Facebook picture, which goes hand in hand with the image that has been used in many of your openings throughout the years in the wrestling business, and that is the Greco-Roman photograph that you have there that was even at the beginning of the NWA TNA Wednesday pay-per-views. Is there a story behind that and how that's become kind of linked with your name?
Well, yes, I still have the original statue. Yes, when I first got into the business, my mother gave me that as a gift. And talking about old school, she's really old school. She wouldn't allow Nick and Roy to book me until I not only learned to work, but until Sailor Moran beat me up in the process of supposedly teaching me to shoot. And so, when she gave it to me, she said, professional wrestling is a lot of show business. But Jerry, always be faithful to wrestling. Mm-hmm. And that statue kind of represents the sport that dates back to biblical times. It
does, and I brought it up kind of half jokingly, but it has become a staple for the openings of your shows. Everything from Continental to USWA to TNA has used it as the part of the opening. And I honestly, it might have sounded like a silly question, but it legitimately always was on my mind if there was some kind of a special meaning to that. And hearing that it came from your mother actually does.
There is, and then there's another thing. vanity plays part in it. I had some of my pictures on Facebook when I first got on it, and people would refer to me as very senior. So I thought, well, the hell with this. I'm not going to advertise that I'm old and fat. So I just used my wrestling logo.
There you go. Well, sir, I can't, again, thank you enough for spending this time with us. And if there's ever anything else I could do for you on the website or on the radio show, just hit me up on Facebook or give me a call. I'd be honored to help you out.
Thank you so much. And again, let me thank you for mentioning my book.
And that book is The Best of Times, and it's available right now on Amazon.com. And it says if you order it now, you can get it by Friday. So people should get on there and order it so they can get a chance to read it. And welcome back to Interactive Wrestling Radio, WrestlingEpicenters.com, and YouTube. It's James, being joined now by Mr. Nick Knoll and Mr. Patrick Kelly. You guys on the line with me?
Hey, howdy. Yeah, I'm here. I am now. I'm glad Patrick is still capable of dialing the phone number. Dialing the phone, because after what went on with him this past week between an earthquake and a hurricane, it's been a crazy week.
Heat wave earlier in the summer. I mean, you know what? I jokingly said this on Facebook, but I'll say it. Mother Nature seems like she'll stop at nothing to get Obama out of Washington.
Oh, no, dude, it's 2012. We're getting closer and closer to it. So we're getting to the end of the world.
Maybe if he gets reelected. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Next year's election year, so.
It is election year. I remember election night of 2008, and I remember it more because that was
we interviewed Frank Stallone.
That's exactly right, yeah. I wonder who we're going to interview on election night 2012.
We should, you know what we should do? We should try to get Frank back, even though he hasn't done anything with the wrestling business since then, just to, compare notes and see where the world is from his 2008 interview to the 2012 interview, and we can discuss how the wrestling business has gone and how the rest of the world has gone. For example, 2008, gas, $2.50 a gallon. Now in Nebraska, $4. Number of wars we were in, 2. Number of wars we're in now, 5.
Hey, that's change, Nick. That's change.
I think we should up it. We should interview Sly Stallone. Try and get a hold of him.
Why not? Hey, if he's willing to play a lion in a weird-ass movie, then he must be willing to do our interview.
Well, he did do a wrestling movie after Rocky that was a huge flop.
Did he?
Really? Yeah, it was called Paradise Alley, and Terry Funk actually tells a funny story about it. He says, if you've ever wanted to see the biggest goddamn group of ass kissers, just do this movie. After every goddamn take, everyone came up to Stallone and said, that was perfect. That was Oscar-worthy.
Wow.
That is the worst Terry Funk impression ever.
Well, let me tell you something, you egg-sucking dog. I gotta tell you, if you're gonna do Terry Funk, you gotta sound like you're just about to break down and cry.
And you gotta swear a lot, goddammit.
I lost my ass in that match, goddammit.
The best one was when we interviewed him again and we referenced that line and thanked him for giving us that awesome line, and he just laughed and said, I did lose my ass in that match.
Yeah, that was after we had the bizarre segment with Missy, which that did not turn out the way I wanted, but I still love Missy, but that was really weird. She just kind of came on and shouted at him. I don't really know. Hey, I love her, though. She's sweet, and I'm glad she did it. So.
Yeah. All right, so now kind of getting back to the modern world of wrestling, and it's been a while since we've done an actual show, part of that being that my car died and I couldn't afford the money to pay the phone bill to do these.
Part of it was I think we needed a break as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and unfortunately, during our break, the world went to hell, and it's literally 1996 again. Kevin Nash is in the WWE main event. Ric Flair, Sting, and Hulk Hogan are main eventing another show. I just want, you know what? People want to know why MMA is kicking wrestling's ass. It's simple. MMA is continuing to evolve at every sense of the word. The fighters, the promotion, the fans, the television deals. Wrestling can't get its fucking head out of the fact that it's not 1996 anymore, God damn it!
And even, those guys, Hogan, Flair, and Sting, I mean, my God, they were, people, maybe not Sting so much, but people viewed Hogan and Flair as relics in, 99. And they're still there. It's unbelievable.
I'll go a step further. A lot of people thought Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan were washed up in the early 90s. And not everyone, but a lot of people kind of felt like after they left the WWF in the 1993, which they both left around the same time for a couple different reasons, most people kind of said, I think a lot of people probably said, well, that's the end of the era, folks. I mean, Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan have got to be towards the end of their career. They've been, on top for almost a decade now each, more so Flair. I mean, he got his first world title was in 1981, Hogan in 84. A lot of people probably thought, well, that's the end of that. I mean, we're going to move into this new era, probably dominated by guys like Bret Hart and Sting, and then I guess we'll see who is after that. And there was a guy named Austin Rock, and then we're back to Hogan and Flair.
Well, we're going to get Sting and Flair again. Yeah, we're getting Sting and Flair again at the next pay-per-view. Did anybody here think that after the last Nitro that we'd see those two wrestle each other again? 10 years later?
No. I'll be honest, I always was kind of hopeful that would be the last match, even when Ric Flair was in WWE and there'd be the occasional rumor, Sting's going to go to WWE, Sting's going to go to WWE. I thought to myself, that was the perfect way, though, to wrap up Sting and Ric Flair's long-term rivalry, because they were the franchise players of WCW through pretty much its whole run as WCW. And they built the house together, and then they closed the house together. And now it's like, no, I mean, and I love Joker Sting. I love the energy that he brings, but, if he's going to have a really great match, he needs to work with someone that can kind of carry him a little bit through the in-ring aspect. I mean, I'm really worried about these two matches with Flair, and then this match with Hogan. I mean, Hogan, I know he hasn't wrestled in a long time, but since then he's had 600 operations on his back?
I'm really worried about it, and here's why. Nobody is a bigger Hogan fan than I am, and I'll defend it to some degree, his being there, because he's not in there wrestling every week. He's not in there pulling a Flair in 2005, beating Carlito and giving him a rub somehow.
I'll agree with that.
What's that again? He's not.
Yeah, how did Carlito turn out?
Yeah, exactly.
I was just saying, I agree with your points about Hogan, that he's not there.
And Flair, Flair's coming to the end, and frankly, with his promos, I think more so than just his career's coming to the end. I mean, holy God. If you're going to wrestle me, it's going to be very impossible. But I'm the boy. What in the world was that, Rick? And I'm not even doing a very exaggerated parody. That's literally how he said it. And it was frightening.
Well, I know that Patrick's not very high on Mike Taney as a commentator right now, which is a fair point. But he made an excellent point that probably summarizes Ric Flair's whole life on Impact. He simply said, Ric Flair can't control himself.
Yeah, well, I mean, read that long article that's come out about his financial troubles and, his alcoholism and all that stuff. Flair's a guy that just never learned how to take care of himself.
Well, see, that's just it. I mean, I'll go back to, like I said, a while back I read Brock Lesnar's book. If anybody thinks he's an idiot for saying, I don't want to be Ric Flair when I'm 60, think again.
Did he say that in the book? Word for word?
Well, he basically said, what he said in his book was, I respected Ric Flair, but I sure as hell didn't want to turn out like him.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. I mean, look at he got kids that, David's turned out okay, but as we found out on our show, he's kind of aloof. Would that be the phrase?
Yeah.
And, Reed's had problems. I mean, he's been in and out of rehabs, and I don't care if I'm breaking as CM Punk would say, the third wall by saying so. If it hasn't been public knowledge, it should be. He's been in and out of rehabs for the past several years.
And he and his daughter got arrested together. Like, they had some incident in, like, a convenience store or something, and, like, Ric Flair and his daughter, I think, were both arrested. So, I mean, and I'm probably the biggest Ric Flair fan in terms of anyone related to our website.
Right.
Right. But it is so hard for me to watch him be this. And, there was a part of me that thought, okay, maybe some of these stories are exaggerated, yada, yada, but more and more you look at it, you're like, okay, it's not exaggerated. If anything, it might have been a little understated how big of a maniac he can be.
And he's turned, and it's, since this is going to be a little bit of a downer, okay, guys? Since we did our last show, I lost another one of my musical heroes in Janie Lane. And I can't say things like how sad I am necessarily for him. Yes, it sucks that he's gone, but he did it to himself. And I'm really horrified by it. And you could see, Janie had the same look on his face, the alcoholism face that Flair has, the bloatedness in his face. And I'm scared to death that Flair's going to, and Patrick and I talked about it earlier today, he's going to drop dead in the ring.
And part of me thinks that's what he wants.
I hate to say that. I've always thought that. Sometimes when I watch him and the way that he goes now into, hardcore matches and just bleeds these buckets, I do think to myself, there's a part of him that wants to go out on his shield. He wants to drop dead in the ring. He wants to, maybe the one place he's ever truly felt great was the wrestling ring, and maybe there's something psychological in him that, like, I don't want to go back out into the real world. I know I'm quoting a lot of people here, but I remember Eddie Guerrero said once, the easy thing is going in the ring for 20 minutes. The hard thing is all the other shit you go through.
And if anybody would know, it's Eddie Guerrero, definitely. But yeah, and getting off of Flair for a second, then the other guy you have is Hogan, who thankfully hasn't wrestled that much since he's been in TNA. He's only had one match.
Oh, please hang up and try again.
What was that?
By the way, guys, are we still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
I can hear you.
I got a little bit of breaking news. I'm sorry if I sounded like I went away there for a second. A little bit of breaking news, even though we're not live. Matt Hardy has just posted a suicide video on YouTube.
What? For real, or like one of his crazy rant things? Like, is this?
It's a crazy rant thing, but he says he's going to kill himself by midnight, and this is his suicide video.
Holy shit!
So if there's anybody out there that has access to the police in Cameron, North Carolina, get on the phone.
Oh wow! Holy shit! See, that sounds like the fact that he's posting it, long before midnight, kind of tells. Well, I guess it's not that long before midnight, but that sounds like a cry for help to me. But Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we were just talking about one guy that has a lot of problems in North Carolina. Let's go to the other guy. Well, one of many from North Carolina that have problems, and that's Matt Hardy, who since the last time we did this show has been in a car accident, charged with a DWI, and was released from TNA.
And he was released from TNA because of his, Hogan was asked point blank on his Facebook page, why was Matt Hardy released? And the exact response was we all have our problems, but some of us don't deal with them very well.
Well, I mean, Matt was already on suspension for, I guess, like, for showing up late to shows all the time. And I think on top of other issues, that this was all the latest straw that broke this is just the straw that broke the camel's back.
That's true.
Yeah, the strange thing with Matt is that we always said with him, Jeff, the thing that kept him from being world champion is the fact that he had so many personal demons. And Matt Hardy, the thing that kept him from being a world champion was that he didn't have Jeff's charisma, but he had, like, the business sense. He always seemed like he had his head on his shoulders, but I don't know what's happened in the last year, but he's arguably more messed up than Jeff.
I think inarguably, if this is the truth. Hold on a second.
I'll say this. Jeff, through all the problems that he's had, it doesn't seem like he's never gone on YouTube and apparently posted a suicide video.
Oh, the suicide note is on my screen right now. I only have a few hours and minutes. I loved you all. Kindest memories. I miss you all. Let's see, this is all scrolling across the screen. September 23, 1974 through August 31st, 2011. With
holy shit,
skitching sound, and now just blacked out and ended. That's it.
Is he on screen or anything, or what?
No, it's just scrolling text from his YouTube channel. He's just posted.
Good Lord.
So he's, if he's still alive when we post this, then it's because somebody called the police department over in Cameron and got their asses over there.
Well, I would be hopeful that, he has a girlfriend what's her name? I think her ring name is like Reby Sky or something. Or maybe
Reby Sky. I know who she is because before she got into the wrestling business, she was a model who was a really big New York Giants fan, and she would show up at the games in like a Superman outfit with the NYG logo and everything. So, yeah, I know who she is.
As long as she's up and around Edge anytime soon, everything should be okay.
Well, I mean, you're hopeful that, either that you would be hopeful that given, Matt, the fact that Matt has, friends and family that, they're checking in on him, my honest to God hope is that somebody is seeing this, that maybe is someone who, if nothing else, maybe might be a friend of, say, just an example, Gregory Helms, and is saying, hey, you might want to check on Matt. He apparently posted a suicide video.
Yeah.
I mean,
now, hopefully, best case scenario is that this is just a cry for attention, and a very bad one, but, dude, just, there's enough tragedy among the wrestling business. We don't need to add your name to the list, man.
Yeah, I mean, wow, that really changed the whole context of this show.
Yeah, totally did. What a downer. Yeah, we're talking about everybody dying and shit. And, wow.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
And I think, I didn't think that Hogan was going to die in the ring. I'm just worried about his, his back and his knees holding up and his hip and everything.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I think Flair needs to keep wrestling mentally. I think with Hogan sometimes it's just been that he's never been able to, in terms of a huge success, had a breakthrough to acting or being a spokesman or something. I mean, he's done here and there, stuff like that, but he's never had like a point where like that supplanted his, income from wrestling. I think he's never been the Rock. Yeah, that's perfect to say. He's never been the Rock, and I'll say this: Hogan has a huge ego, so I think if you ask him, Hulk, what's really the best main event for Bound for Glory, he probably would tell you, me and Sting, because he truly believes he can outdraw anybody else on the TNA roster. We'll see what ultimately happens. I'll be honest. I think that Philly crowd is going to rip that match apart. I just have the sinking feeling that they're going to be like the really, really, the ECW crowd and like the Ring of Honor Smart Mark crowd. Like they are just going to rip that match to shreds. Well, Patrick, I have news for you. The ECW fans were rebellious. What the Ring of Honor fans are is when they're at, like, their safe little Ring of Honor shows, they'll chant, fuck TNA, fuck TNA, fuck TNA, fuck TNA. Then they will buy a ticket to a TNA show like Lockdown, which TNA's run Lockdown there a couple times, and go nuts.
Which that is so, like, I don't know, that's, you know, it always bugged me when the ECW crowd would go to WWF events and start chanting ECW. It's like, come on, dude. What's the point?
They don't even chant ROH. Despite what some people will probably tell you, most of these so-called ROH bots, it's what they like to bash TNA because they think it makes them sound smart. Yeah, here's the thing. It's pretty clear if you read some of their comments. They watch the show start to finish.
Oh, totally.
I mean, so, you know, there was a certain guy who was on our forum, previously in Garden State Saint, and he would find any little issue to nitpick about. Whether, I think once his nitpick was something along the lines of a tag team didn't wear the same colored tights. That was his whole bitch for the whole show. It's like, how can this company allow that to happen? What, a wrestler put, what, you want the agents start wrestling the professional wrestlers?
Yeah.
And
the one that got me was, I think it was PW Torch, when they reviewed, like, the Impact before Lockdown 08. And they had, like, a big thing, because all the Christian Cage Lethal Lockdown team guys, they all walked around with T-shirts that said Team Cage. It wasn't anything fancy. It was, you know, white letters on a black shirt. And they went crazy on, like, T-shirts and all these giant rants. I'm like, well, geez, those Raw versus SmackDown shows, the draft episodes, probably drove them nuts. Because it's like, he just went on and on about T-shirts. And I'm like, really? This is what we're going to go after? I don't know. It seems silly to me, but...
Yeah, see, that's just it. Well, the thing that drives me nuts sometimes with TNA, and I feel like I always talk about this, I feel like that a lot of times people will take little things on TNA, blow it up to a huge proportion, and try to nitpick every little thing, and that becomes the whole thing they want to talk about. Yet with WWE, they'll let those little things go. I think part of that is loyalty to the fact that admittedly, a lot of people are WWE fans first. That's most people's, including my own, introduction into the world of professional wrestling. Whether some people want to admit it or not, they were originally a WWE fan. Then maybe they developed a taste for other companies. You know, yeah. You know, I'll just say this. I have a bigger issue with the idea of we have a guy running the show despite the fact no one knows who he is.
And they never cleared up what that was. They still set up the Raw GM thing for every show, but they haven't used it since I think the Punk thing started.
Yeah, which you know what? I'm starting to think he sent the text. The Raw GM sent the text, and like one day he'll just email in the middle of it, and Cole will get up and say, "Perhaps you all should have considered the fact that I was completely supplanted after Triple H returned. So that was my grand revenge, to cause all this issue between Triple H and CM Punk."
One last thing here, guys. I am here. I kind of disappeared in the background. I've called the Cameron Police Department, and they're sending people over there.
Oh, wow. James on top of things.
I can't sit by and when I post this tomorrow and if you find out that he did kill himself, I can't post this and say I didn't do nothing about it. So yes, I called over there. I called the Lee County Sheriff's Department, and they put me in contact with the appropriate representation, and they're sending cops over there. So hopefully
you don't know his address.
I do not know his address, but because of all the problems he's had with the law, obviously they have it on file.
Yeah, well, plus one would assume, I don't know the exact size of Cameron, North Carolina, but I'm going to assume that the world-famous professional wrestler is somewhat of a well-known person within the town.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like out here in Omaha, a lot of people know where Warren Buffett lives.
Oh, man.
Yeah, well, it's like around my town, you know, everybody knows where the president lives, you know.
Which Vice president.
Oh, there you go. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to call it a night here in a second, but I did want to mention this before we go. It seems like we have entered a new world. I'm not sure if you guys talked about it yet. A new world where we have left the brand extensions and apparently entered some sort of Super Mario Super World, Super Show world where everything, despite being the same show, now that it features both brands, is now going to be considered a super show for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, which, if you do it every week, it's not a super show.
I was thinking that when James was telling me about it. I didn't see Raw last night because I was kind of conked out. But, well, you know, I know we were good. Yeah, go ahead, Nick. I'm trailing off.
Allow me to summarize. Triple H came out and basically declared that for the foreseeable future, Raw and SmackDown wrestlers will appear on both shows. Pretty much signaling the end of the brand extension that pretty much had been over for 5 years already.
It's not, I mean, everybody says that, but it's at least been divided with titles and things. And now that we have where it seems like it's not going to be, there is just too many champions to where they have no choice but to condense.
Oh, yeah.
I will say this. I'm going to leave you guys with this. I love the Sting character. I love the, and this is TNA, I know I'm talking about, or Impact Wrestling, or whatever I'm supposed to call it. I love the Sting character. I love the fact that we're going to see another Hogan match. I know it's, you know, and like I said, it's a special attraction. It's not being billed as the main event, and I think that is, you know, where it needs to be. The world title needs to be the main event. And I will be buying Bound for Glory, assuming that the match is going to go forward. I have my same fears as Nick, but watching Raw this week, I will say this. It's the first time in a number of years, probably since 02-03, where I feel like they're really actually making an effort to try to find their way, try to find a direction. With a lot of the insider comments being made by both Lawler and Cole, and even insider comments thrown in there by Ross, with things like the divas backstage who can actually work, talking about the lame asses that are actually in the ring.
Well, yeah, but James, to be fair, basically right now, Beth and Natalia are playing what ODB and Jackie did a couple weeks ago.
You're right. You're absolutely right. But I'm just trying to, giving the devil their due, it seems to me like they're actually trying to do something different and find some kind of realism in their realm, which, you know, has been blown out and not been the case for a better part of a decade, if not longer. So it's a good. It was the first time that it felt like they were trying to do something different in a long time, and the CM Punk character is basically the catalyst of all of that. But I don't know that the brand split's going to do any good because the SmackDown guys I view as less than, and having them mixed in with the Raw guys just makes Raw seem less than. It's kind of like oil and water. You mix the two, and yeah. Oh,
you don't want Mark Henry in a Raw main event?
Not at all. I got to make it clear. I DVD record all the wrestling shows and essentially watch them in an hour span in fast forward mode. And I can't say that I watched more than maybe 3, 4, 5 seconds of that main event. In fast forward, I just had no interest. So.
Yeah, well, I think ending the brand split, because, you know, if they did it and they fully dedicated themselves to it, it would be a really good idea, probably. But, you know, you look at Raw and SmackDown right now, the rosters, I don't think the rosters are big enough to support their own shows. I mean, they've got, 20 guys on each show, it seems, which is, you know, it's really not that big of a roster, and you got 4 guys going for the mid-card title, and that's about it. No tag division. And no, I don't think that Kofi and Evan Bourne winning the tag titles is all of a sudden like a tag team rebirth that everybody else seemed to. I don't get how.
Well, substitute Kofi and Evan Bourne with Cade and Murdoch, Eminem, the Hardy Boys reforming, all the other
MVP
Kofi
and Mark Henry.
Punk. Yeah, I mean, this comes up all the time. I mean, every once in a while somebody decides the WWE will put a belt, the tag team titles, on a team, and people will be like, oh yes, they're finally going to start pushing the tag team division. No. Oh yeah, no. No, yeah, no.
Yeah, I'll believe it when it happens. I'll believe it when I see it. But for, Kofi and Evan Bourne, no knock on them, but that's, I'm not going to watch them win the titles and all of a sudden, after only being a team for like a week, they won it, they won it after 8 days, 2 matches. That's not going to make me believe that they're all of a sudden going to get serious about a tag division. How's that any different from the other crap they've done over the years?
Exactly. I mean, we even talked about it with the Hearts. I mean, it's like, well, you might as well put the belt on the Hearts because they're your best team. Then look what pretty much happened.
They had nobody to work with.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they had a brief run with the Usos, and the problem is so often, I feel like especially with tag teams, they will introduce the team, they'll get an initial kind of push, then they'll just get dropped. And
yeah, the one exception in the last few years was Jericho. And that was only because it was Jericho, really. And because DX wanted to win the tag titles. I mean, I think that was part of it, too. But that was really, like, the only time it felt like they introduced a new team that didn't get flushed down the drain after only a month.
Yeah, and getting back to the brand split, my personal belief has always been it was a good idea that they executed terribly most of the time. If you're going to do a brand split, it actually has to be just that, a brand split. You can't have Raw and SmackDown guys constantly appearing on each other's shows because that whittles down the appeal of it. Because it's like, well, I just saw this guy on Raw 2 weeks ago when they did the last 3-hour Raw. And, the other issue is, like you said, the roster isn't big enough. And they don't put any emphasis on the titles. I mean, Dolph Ziggler is the U.S. champion. Who does he really have to work with? Maybe Alex Riley. But right now the bigger story seems to be, will Vicky Guerrero choose Dolph or Jack Swagger?
Yeah, exactly.
Who the hell is Intercontinental Champion, by the way?
I think it's Cody Rhodes, but don't quote me on that. I don't watch SmackDown. I usually don't. I didn't watch the live SmackDown tonight. I completely forgot about it. So, whoops.
Yeah. See, that's it. We have, ideally, there was a book I read once. It said, back in the day when you had multiple territories, what could happen to be, a guy could come into a territory, work with everybody over the roster that he could work with. Then he could move on, go somewhere else. And maybe in a couple of years, you could bring him back, and because he's had time to be away, he's going to be fresher, and obviously other new wrestlers will be around for him to work with. That would be the ideal for the brand split to work. Have a guy on Raw, have him work with everybody, send him over to SmackDown until it's time to bring him back to Raw. Unfortunately, it just seems like what happens is Randy Orton goes to Raw, he's WWE champion. Randy Orton goes to SmackDown, he's World Heavyweight champion. There's no real difference between the two shows. I mean, same with John Cena, or that they'll change the titles every couple of weeks, but more or less it's the same people to win the same belts.
And, right now, I don't like the idea of having two world champions, especially since they're so not dedicated to keeping the shows separate anyway. Because to me, the SmackDown title is basically the Intercontinental title now. It is the mid-card championship. People can say it's not, but, does anybody honestly view it on being on par with the Raw title? I don't, especially with the way the storylines have gone on lately. It's just seems insignificant. And I just go ahead and unify the belts and then, go back to just doing what you were doing with the belts before.
Right. I mean, look, for example, I think I'm not stepping out on a limb here, Patrick, if I say probably one of our favorite times in the whole brand split was a couple of years ago when they just let CM Punk and Jeff Hardy be the SmackDown guys, and that was such a great, strong show. SmackDown felt different than Raw. It works differently than Raw. You had different people winning the belts, and then they just blew it by giving it back to The Undertaker.
Yeah, we all remember that. But Yeah, the brand extension is just one of those things that they never fully dedicated themselves to, even though they said they did.
Yeah.
For reasons that even like when it first started back in 2002, you had Undertaker, who was on Raw, showing up on SmackDown every other week. And they would always do things like that, where a Raw guy would show up on SmackDown and a SmackDown guy would show up on Raw. And it got to a point where Del Rio was a SmackDown guy, yet he was wrestling on Raw every week with no explanation. He was just there on Raw. And you can't do those kind of things and expect me to think it's a big deal when they switch brands.
Exactly. I mean, you've got to treat it, if you're going to do a brand extension, you've got to treat it like when a football player signs a deal in the NFL. If Michael Vick signs a deal with the Philadelphia Eagles, that means he can't go play on an off week with the St. Louis Rams.
Huh.
Or something like that. Or it just doesn't work that way, That's why it's got to be, I think you summed it up perfectly when you said they never really dedicated themselves to it. It was just, oh yeah, we have separate shows.
The concept was...
I thought you left.
I did leave, but I can't keep myself away.
That was my last...
The concept, I'm like Ric Flair. The concept was... The concept was that they were going to try and create competition within their own company to simulate the concept of WWE versus WCW. And ultimately, it's like anything when you're doing it yourself. I don't know if anybody here used to play with wrestling action figures, but when you play with wrestling action figures, occasionally you can change the rules to suit whatever game you have going in your own head. Obviously, I don't do that anymore, but when I was a kid, I did. And that's basically how Vince McMahon treats the wrestling business. The guys are the toys. He plays with them for a little while, and when he gets bored with them, he throws them away. The same goes with this. He kind of did it his own way, and when he got bored with it, he kind of changed the rules as he went along. And obviously, you can't do that with a professional thing like the NFL and all that, because there's a billion pundits and $1 billion and a billion everything going along with it that'll stamp all over it if you do, and the lockout is proof and evidence of that.
Yep. That's pretty much it. I mean, I will say this: the sad thing will be we're probably going to see a lot of talented but underutilized wrestlers get cut because now there's going to be even less room for them on the blocks of shows.
Right, but the thing is, and I was talking about this with James, you look at this year's Royal Rumble, and look at all the ham and eggers that came out. I mean, who's going to get cut that's really if they really, cut the talents that probably shouldn't be there, are they really going to lose anybody that significant?
Well, see, I agree with you on that point, but I'm a big believer that the WWE has a lot of talented wrestlers that they just don't, push correctly. It's like they decide, okay, Del Rio is a main eventer. No matter what, Alberto Del Rio will be world champion by the end of the year, regardless of how fans are reacting to him. And it's the same way. If they decide, okay, Zack Ryder, you're going to be just this job boy, you're going to be a job boy. And I understand that, yeah, there are a lot of guys that, nobody really cares about, but I think a lot of that has to go on the booking because they don't give guys a chance. Even if the guy is having incredible matches and has all this potential, the fans are reacting to him, they won't care. They won't try to move him up. And they won't try to move the guys that clearly aren't working in the main event or clearly aren't ready to be in the main event or don't have a strong enough character to be in the main event. Alberto Del Rio, for example. They won't move
that out of the country for the time being.
But you know what I think that is? I think the Mexican people are so offended by the way this guy represents them. As you said it, it's like Adam Sandler doing a bad Razor Ramon impression. That they have locked Alberto Del Rio away.
You don't mess with the Zohan.
Pretty much, yeah.
What a crappy movie. I love Adam Sandler movies, but that movie sucks.
What movie?
You Don't Mess with the Zohan.
I never saw it, so.
You didn't miss much.
A lot of his later movies haven't been, haven't really captured my attention, so.
I really, 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 really liked Just Go With It. I really like that. And the Zookeeper or whatever, which I know is kind of his production but not his movie, is better than he gets credit for. I actually enjoyed it.
Oh, wow.
I'm the one. I'm the one.
I just lost faith in humanity hearing you say that.
It was a cute little movie.
I never saw it, but it just looked really bad.
It is, but it's funny bad.
Funny bad. Okay.
It's not.
I like funny bad.
It's not like Cowboys versus Aliens, which sounds funny bad, but isn't attempting to be silly at all, which just makes it come off as a really weird and really shitty movie.
Pretentious, I think, is the word you're looking for.
Essentially. How do you come off as pretentious with a movie called that? Exactly. That's what you said earlier, and it's just...
Well, to be fair, look at who the lead actor was. It was that Daniel Craig guy.
James Bond.
Yes, the worst James Bond ever.
Well, you know what? I have never seen Casino Royale, and I know that's sacrilege because everybody says it's one of the best Bond movies. I did see Quantum of Solace, and I wasn't impressed.
See, I don't know. To me, it's like they. I don't know. My dad makes this point. I agree with him. It's that James Bond is not really supposed to be the badass killer. He's supposed to be what he was with Sean Connery, what he was with Roger Moore. He's supposed to be a cool, collected, smooth operator that kills when he's forced to. I don't know, maybe it's just my family. We just think that, like, the twist that Daniel Craig puts on the part is too dark.
Maybe. I'll tell you who I thought was a great Bond. Even though the movies he was in were typically really bad, Pierce Brosnan. Like, if I had never seen a James Bond movie before and you gave me a description of the character, that's how I would picture him. How he would look and how he would act and everything. And, GoldenEye was really good, but other than that, I mean, most of his movies were crap, and that's kind of what hurts his time as Bond. But I think, as Bond, I thought he was really good.
Yeah, I think he helped make some of the... Let's just say this, as bad as those movies may have been, they would have been a lot worse without him in it.
Yeah. Oh, the Halle Berry one? That one was... Ugh.
It would... I honestly feel like they made such a big deal out of, like, oh, Halle Berry's going to be a Bond girl, Halle Berry's going to be a Bond girl. I'm like, so? I'll be honest, I don't really get why she's considered that attractive.
I think she's hot. It's just, I don't think she's that good of an actress. And the fact that she has the Best Actress award, I think is kind of silly.
Well,
and then we're really... Yeah, go ahead.
That was the year where Hollywood decided they were going to make the black people feel good by making the white people feel really bad.
Well, the thing about her is that she's half white. So, I mean, I hate to point that out, but, just throwing that out there.
Yeah. All right, so that is pretty much the world of wrestling so far this week. We've got Matt Hardy threatening to kill himself. We got Ric Flair apparently trying to kill himself in the ring. We got 1996 again. I mean, my God. Even though it won't happen in Night of Champions, Kevin Nash will wrestle a match, and he will beat CM Punk.
Well, it's going to be CM Punk and Triple H, and number one, they are rushing that match way too quickly. That's a match that they should have held off for at least a few months.
Well, apparently what happened is that Nash failed some kind of medical test, but, like, everyone's like, oh, but he'll be fine in a few weeks. I'm like, then don't do the Triple H CM Punk match, because that does have potential, but the problem is, this is the issue I always have with WWE. there's stuff that they do that I will admit has potential, but knowing the patterns that they set themselves into, I have no faith that they will break those patterns. So
well, look at the Punk thing. Look at when right after Money in the Bank, like they were on a fucking high because of what they did at that pay-per-view, and they what happened after that? They crammed basically 6 months of storylines into a week.
Exactly. I mean, somebody even said that CM Punk's, when I posted on like CM Punk has returned, someone said, did he ever leave?
Yeah, it was like they didn't even give us time to miss him.
Exactly. I mean, think of the reaction. We've already said this, but think of the reaction that could have gotten if you had held off just a month. Just a month. And wait until, SummerSlam and, have Cena regain the belt, even though I'm not I guess that ultimately made sense given that they did the unification match. Have Cena regain the belt, and as he's celebrating and the Cena lovers are going nuts and the Cena haters are going, oh, God. Imagine you hit that music and out comes CM Punk. That could have been like the big, oh my God, I gotta watch Raw now because CM Punk's back. Oh my God, Instead, like you said, they crammed 6 months worth of story into 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't just the Punk thing. It's like they did,
a tournament?
They did a tournament to crown the new champion. They had that champion lose the title. And they rushed the Punk thing, all in the span of 8 days. So, we'll rush.
Patrick, I gotta get going because I gotta get to work, and,
okay, man, that actually sounds great.
Yeah, so, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Thank you to Jerry Jarrett for joining us. And I say this quite honestly, we hope that Matt Hardy is okay and can get some much-needed help.
Yes, exactly. We don't need any more wrestling tragedies in this day and age. But thanks again to Jerry Jarrett for being on the show with us. Thank you to James Walsh, the hero who I guess if he helped prevent Matt Hardy from killing himself, major props to James Walsh for doing that. But thank you for setting up the interview and getting us together tonight. And hope you all enjoyed the show. And we'll see you all at a later date. Bye, everybody.